So in the fall of 2016, I gathered together with 18 students, and we began an investigation into the Santa Clara community. We started with a set of questions that we thought would possibly get us some interesting material about what people are willing to say and what people are not willing to say publicly. About midway through the quarter, there was 2 incidents on campus that came to light: the vandalism of the missing 43 and the swastika written in blood, that we felt we had to address. One of the things that I said to my students every week was, what is the story that the campus is telling us this week? And as the quarter progressed, the story changed. So what we started to look at was the processes that the campus has in place, both institutionally and in more informal ways, in ways that students react, and particularly bodies of students react, student organizations react, when something happens on campus that feels like it has disrupted our community. As the play progressed, the play started asking other questions that needed to be answered, that were more specific to the incidents, particular ways that you can think about the Casa Italiana incident in a more complex way. What's your idea of the Jesuit philosophy? Can you tell me that in your own words? So as we moved further into the quarter, and by the time we got to the end of the quarter, we had a rough draft that I then took away over Christmas break and finished rewriting based on the interviews and the research that we had done. One of the things that was not a surprise, but possibly a discovery, was that when we were conducting the interviews, everyone that we talked to, from people who worked in facilities, to faculty and staff, to students, carried some part of the mission of this university. And they carried and held it with them in their daily activities. From the gardener who said, I sometimes have to work with students who have gone through conduct hearings, and I feel like that's part of my job here at the university. That's part of my job holding the mission. And that idea that there is a firm mission that this university is engaged with, and a mission in the best ways has a lofty ideal that we should always be reaching towards, a mission that isn't static, became for me a bedrock of the play. Here's this mission. What happens when we don't live up to it? How do we continue to live up to it? The other thing that I was wanting the play to do was attempting to model a civil discourse around difficult issues. I think this became really important to me, particularly during the fall, during the election, and what seemed to be this lack of civil discourse around anything, and that we had the possibility here at a Jesuit institution to say, yeah, these things are hard, and we don't always know how to talk about them, but let's figure out how we can at least start to talk about them in a way where we are listening to each other. So those were the 2 things that guided me along the way. What was the process that the university was going through with this disruption? How are we living up to or not living up to our mission? And how can we model a civil discourse around difficult issues? And those were the places that I went back to again and again and again when I was putting the play together. How did I put the play together? Surprisingly, the first things that came about with the play were the sections that were movement. Aldo asked me, is there going to be movement in the play? And I knew that we were going to be working with David as a choreographer. And because I've been working with choreographers primarily for the past 5 years, and off and on for the past 15, I think movement ideas came first. And those became the pillars of the play. And then the interviews started to collect around a set of ideas. So there's a set of interviews that are people's initial reaction to the incidents that happened. There's a set of interviews that happened between this particular time period, where where it was a little confusing about who knew what and at what point and how the information was getting out. And then there's a set of interviews about moving forward. So those started to coalesce into discrete units of the play. And then it became a matter of juxtaposing those things. How does this section of these interviews bump up against this section of some of the history of other disruptions of campus, bump up against this section of movement? I knew I didn't want to work in a necessarily linear Aristotelian fashion. It felt to me like what I was making was a collage, that we were trying to look at the university from as many different perspectives as possible. And that includes a narrative line that's held by text, a narrative line that's held by movement, a narrative line that's held by music, and a narrative line that's held by images. And there's a play of all of those four things in the play. And at various points, one of those things holds more of the weight of the narrative line. But they're a way of collaging various views of the campus together.